early years. Oh, there we go. So it's really well worth going and having a look at the early years evidence store. So online, the Education Endowment Foundation have put together a really good website with lots of the latest evidence across a whole range of things. So yes, language and communication, but also your PSHE, all of the aspects that you're going to want to look at as an early years practitioner. So go and have a look. Okay. There's another few fully funded programs that are now running from the hub. So you've got professional development program, Talking Time, and they also offer bespoke support. So do please get in touch with Damon, Jess, Vic, or Lisa if you feel that, you know, there's something that your setting needs and you're not quite sure how to go about getting it. They will walk you through everything that you need and provide something that you will find useful. Fancy QR codes, have a scan, and then go and have a look on Instagram as well, because that's also a very good thing to just keep up to date with what's being offered. Okay, so back to my bit. So we're thinking about communication. I kind of thought, right, let's go back to basics for a minute, shall we? Let's have a think about all the kind of communications that we might see in our setting. You've got your, you know, traditional speaking, listening, reading, but let's have a little think about what a child is trying to tell us if they run towards something or they run away from something. What is that hitting telling us? What is laughing telling us? They're singing, they're signing, there's lying down and just not doing anything. It's all a communicative behavior. And actually what we need to do is try and maximize those and try and think how we can support the children who are communicating in perhaps a slightly less traditional way, okay? And how can we make our setting as rich in opportunity as possible for that, okay? And I kind of had a little think, and I was kind of basing this on a presentation that I had done many years ago. And my first thing was have lovely, colourful display boards. And I thought, well, I'll just double check this. And the first thing I Googled was colourful display boards. And I found this that said, why display boards are a waste of practitioner time. And I went, wow, oh, right. Okay, this has changed. And so I phoned Vic from the hub and I went, do you have colourful display boards? And she went, no, we don't. And then we had a big, long discussion about why we don't have colourful display boards anymore. And I just kind of, you know, did that really and just went, oh my goodness, what am I going to do here? Everything I thought I knew is a little bit out of date perhaps and a little bit, you know, not current. So there's kind of a disclaimer here. There may be some discussion points around today's webinars, that there might be some things that I've suggested that perhaps aren't commonplace in early years settings anymore. And I would very much welcome people using the chat facility, perhaps having a section in the Q&A where you may feel that you want to challenge or question or think about some of the things that I've suggested so we can talk together and find solutions and best practice. So I'm a speech and language therapist, not an early years practitioner. And although a lot of my practice sometimes can take place in an early years setting, I'm not an early years practitioner. So we may need to come to some, you know, we may have some discussions. I don't know. Listen to what we've got to say and then we'll chat at the end. Okay. But that's just a kind of, you know, me putting it out there that the very first thing I thought kind of maybe go, ooh. So we move on. Let's see how we go, shall we? Let's see what, if everybody nods or if everyone goes, ooh. Right. First thing I want to think about, vocabulary. So we know, or we should know, that research indicates that lexicon size, so that's your receptive vocabulary size, and academic success are very closely related. So a preschooler's vocabulary is a really strong predictor of a child's ability to learn to read. Okay, so a very famous study in 1995 studied the communication between parents and their children and found that by age 4 you had a real contrast. You had some children that have been exposed to like 50 million words and others had only been exposed to 10 million words. So obviously the more words we know, the better our predicted success. academically, quite dramatically. So how can we maximize vocabulary in our early years setting? Okay, label, 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 speak it, write it, represent it in pictures, use objects of reference, anything. Just keep putting that language in. Repetition is key, particularly for children with underlying speech and language communication needs. Okay, the more you repeat it, the better it is. Even if you feel like you have done it to death. If you feel like you've done it to death, you've probably only just about done it enough. So do it more. Not too many new words at once, okay? Try and think topics, try and think focus. Parent carryover. Communicate with your parents. What is our topic? Can they spot the words outside of the setting? Can you create opportunities to discuss the same kinds of things that we have been doing in our setting outside of the setting? So you're looking at widening the children's experience of the words that they've had in your setting. Phonological awareness, massive. Clap the syllables. What sound does it begin with? Can we find any words that rhyme? These are the building blocks of early reading skills, and it's really important that we are thinking building blocks. So yeah, syllables, sounds, rhyming, all of those things. Semantic links, so how words interlink and interplay with one another. Which words mean nearly the same? Which words mean the opposite? And maybe for our slightly older preschoolers, does this word have any meanings? So any other meanings? So think about the word bank, for example, a river bank, a piggy bank. We go to the bank, a bank of knowledge. So all of these things are taking a word and really forensically looking at that word and in terms of its structure, but also in terms of the words that link with it and to it. I really like this one. Now, again, I think this perhaps shows how long ago I wrote this, because it's now Tapestry, isn't it? It's now Tapestry. It's now all done online. But I thought I'd just keep it anyway. But some kind of experience log or diary log of what a child has been doing. However that gets home, whether it is your traditional book or whether it's an online way of doing it. A labeled pictorial record of what the child has been doing. So it can help the child recall the concepts and vocabulary. It's a prompt for practicing that language. It provides a basis on which to extend language. It also tells the parents, what's been going on. And it's really, really useful for EAL families as well, who can then take the language that has been used in nursery and present it again in the child's home language as well. So having something go bi-directionally as well, so from home back into your setting as well, so that you can do it in reverse. There's so much value to it. It's not just a nice thing for the parents to be able to see what their kid has been doing. It has a lot of potential for language consolidation if it's used in the right way. And it may well be worth some kind of newsletter home to say, how can you use Tapestry or whatever you use at home for speech and language enrichment at home? A word on acoustics. Now, my background as a speech and language therapist is working with children, deaf children, and also working with cochlear implants and hearing implants. So I'm all about acoustics. I'm all about how do we manage noise. So very young children, they need low background noise and they need low reverberation time and reverberation levels. So reverberation is obviously how sound bounces around a room. Now, we know we need wipe clean in a nursery. We know we need wipe clean wherever we can, but that causes sound to bounce. So we need as much softness around as well to absorb that sound so we don't have sound reverberating too much. So high background noise levels, and sound reflective hard surfaces cause a noise buildup. The children talk more loudly, they compete with one another, it gets louder and louder and louder, and it's just a din. And the additional stress that that causes to young children just heightens the effects of our inability to perceive speech. Okay. So if you think about it, when we're listening in a noisy background, we've got a full speech and language system. We can fill in the gaps if we miss a word or two. We can infer from our knowledge of what's going on what that person might be talking about. And we know if we hear the traffic lights went from red to amber to we know that word is the word green because we know the sequence of traffic lights. Children can't do that yet. So it can make a noisy place incredibly stressful. And if you have a developing speech and language system like they all have, and then you have speech and language problems on top of that, it's nigh on impossible. And then if you have glue ear too, perhaps, as a lot of our littlies have, it's really, really very difficult for them. And that's going to compromise their attention, their concentration, and it's going to increase those negative behaviours. So we really need to try and think about all of the noise in our setting. And here's a really interesting little diagram here. So before we even put children in our setting, think about all of the other noise you've got when your room is at rest. There's noise via open windows, there's potentially rain and weather, aircrafts, plumbing noises. Whenever anyone flushes the toilet, do we all know about it? You know, there's traffic noise if we're facing onto a main road. And then you've got all of the other noises that are coming on, okay? So you've got a noisy place potentially before you've even put any children in it. And I just wanted to think about us as adults. So when you have a phone call, do you turn the TV down or the radio down or the music down? I know I do. If you're having a conversation with somebody, do you ask your children just to quieten down a little bit so you can concentrate? Sometimes if we've been to a pub or a cafe that's really noisy, how many of us get outside and go, oh, it's better. Oh, a bit much in there, wasn't it? And how many of us do find it a bit tiring to keep up with a conversation in a noisy place? We do. And that's after maybe only hour, 2 or 3 hours, 4 hours if it's a cracking night out, but not the potential sort of, what are we, up to about 11 hours in a setting a day for our children who are in at 7 and home at 6. It can be really tiring. So I just want you to try and think about how you feel when you've been in a noisy setting for a little while and how that must be on our children. And one of my particular things that I worry about is the use of music in the setting. And I'm sure Jess won't mind me saying, but we've had quite a conversation with the barn about this when they saw my slides. So they said we use music in our setting at lunchtime because it's really calming. And I said, okay, good, lovely. But actually we have lots of useful, spontaneous, natural peer interactions at lunchtime. So children are practicing conversation, asking questions. What's that? What's in your sandwich? Did your mummy make it? Or I've got one of those too. I like them. That's nasty. All of these conversations are taking place. Do we need the music? Or is that making it slightly more difficult for them to interact? If they're having to filter out an extra source of background noise, that interaction has the potential to be more difficult. More difficult is less pleasurable. Less pleasurable means we're less likely to try. So I'm not saying don't use music. You know, if someone says we use calm music at nap time or during sensory time, fabulous. Language use at that point is low. You're less likely to have conversations. Everybody's quiet. So music is more appropriate there. So I'm not saying don't use music. I'm just saying question your rationale. When are you using it? Why are you using it? Is it motivating and part of that task? Fine, keep it going. Is it just on to make everybody feel nice? Or just have a think about how many other interactions are going on at the time? And actually the barn have now kind of said, well, yeah, we're going to try not having music on at lunchtime for a bit, just to see how that goes. These are great. If you are a setting that does have access to some kind of either a whiteboard or an iPad or some kind of digital visual, then background noise apps for classrooms and early year settings are brilliant. So you've got the bouncy balls one, which is basically the louder the classroom, the higher the balls fly. And that can be a really good indicator for the children. You need to keep the balls as low to the ground as you can. Or you've got the more traditional kind of speedometer. When it hits the red, it's too noisy. But these are all things to think about to help to, children are very good at changing what they do if they've got a mechanism to understand it. And I think that's kind of what these help to do. Group time. Some of this may be old hat to some of you, but I know that some of you are newer to practice. So, I'm trying to cover everybody. So at group time, try and remember, get all of the children to sit in a circle. Everyone can see each other then. When asking questions, make sure that everybody knows who's speaking. Okay, so if you feel that a child said something that wasn't clear or easy to understand, repeat it or recast it. So maybe say it in a different way. Try and make sure that each child takes turns. I know that it's really, really hard, really hard. Just give it your best shot. So be aware of the noise level, which we've talked about, and have some visual props ready if you can. Listening walks are lovely around a setting. And I'm not sure that these are done an awful lot, but they're really nice. So walk around inside or outside your setting. It helps to focus children's attention and just kind of listen to things that are really commonplace. It's wonderful to be working on adjectives with this. So, for example, I'm talking about going into the toilets, flushing the toilet. What does that sound like? Running the tap. Is it a wobbly sound? Is it a straight sound? Is it a drippy sound? Lots and lots of different things. They don't have to be outside. A lot of people think they have to be outside, but listening to normal, everyday environmental sounds and really having to think about, what are the qualities of those sounds? Get children listening and get them thinking about sound. And actually, that can be really nice for our children with speech and language and communication needs, because very often all of their activities are about, obviously, speech and language. Sometimes it's nice to pull the language out of it and just listen to stuff. It's still work. It's still looking at things like rhythm. It's still looking at the qualities of sounds, whether they're high pitched, low pitched, middle pitched, their timbre, their quality. It's just doing it in a different way. And that can be very powerful. And it can also take the pressure off a lot of children with speech and language needs. Role play areas are lovely. Again, you probably all know this already, but role play areas, they give opportunities to practice new vocabulary, turn take, problem solve, share, act out social scenes. They, help with theory of mind. So how do I see the world? How do other people see the world? Acting out emotions in themselves, acting out emotions in others. They do negotiating, dealing with conflict. All sorts of things happen in a role play area, as well as those kind of imaginative and creative thinking skills. A lot can be said for a role play area. And very often it's offering something that isn't always in the home. So yeah, a lot of homes will have like a toy kitchen. A lot of homes, might have some role play stuff, but often in a setting, that role play area is a little bit extra and it's something they don't have at home. Emotions. Okay, so if children feel safe, they will communicate more. So it's really important that we have a think about how we're addressing emotions in setting. It's quite wordy, but again, you can go back over this when you get the slides. Make sure you label an awful lot of emotions. Label them in yourself and label them in others. So reflect back about how children are feeling or why. So, you look like you're upset because Leia's got the new pushchair. But help them make sense of social situations. Give them the words to describe their feelings. Help them understand how other people are feeling. Have cozy, comfortable areas where you can go to talk about your feelings. Have pictures up, visual support, so that children can refer to them easily. If they don't know the name of that, how they're feeling, if they can have a facial expression to point to, it's a good way in for you. Please don't label emotions as good or bad. As we know, all emotions are valid, and we want children not to feel that they can't tell us things because they are a bad emotion. Yeah, we can say it's not nice to feel it, but they're not bad. Okay. Talk about how you're feeling too. It's incredibly powerful for children to know that grown-ups have a bad day. Okay. They really need to know. And the amount of children that I've worked with where I go, God, I've had a rubbish day today. They're like, what? You're a grown-up. You know, it's really important that they see us having feelings too. Talk about how the characters are feeling in books, even if it isn't mentioned explicitly in the words. You know, for example, Dear Zoo. Dear Zoo looks like just a book where we uncover some animals and talk about what they are. But how does that central character feel when he keeps getting his unsuitable pets? You know, is he feeling sad? Does he get grumpy? Does he feel frustrated? Is he still feeling hopeful that he'll get the right pet? You know, all these things we can draw out with a little bit of thought. During role play, you take on the perspective of the different characters. Share your favourite ideas with parents and carers as well, so they can try them at home. Most parents feel a bit worried with the old emotion side of things because some don't know how much is too much and should I be doing this. So I think a little bit of support for parents can be really good too. These are two of my absolute favourite books for talking about feelings. The first one is Better for Your Real Littlies, and the second one is better for the probably the preschoolers. But these are both available on Amazon and they're both super. And the How Are You Feeling Today book also does have an activity book that goes along with it if you buy that too. So if you're going to buy any two books on feelings for your setting, have a look at those. They're really very good. Moving on to books and reading now. Oh no, not this book again. Okay, now this was a really big study that came out in 2011, and it suggested that it's actually not the number of books, but the repetition of each book that leads to greater learning. So you know when your child goes, read me that one again, and you're like, oh my God, I've had this book read, I've read this like 50 gazillion times this month. How can you possibly want it again? Actually, those are the opportunities for deeper learning. So the first time you read it, it might just be the story. Then it's going to be the details of description and so on, you know, new words introducing a variety of contexts. So actually, it's the repetitions of the books that's key. Not saying always stick to one, but when a child wants a book again and again and again and again and again, I think a lot of people think, well, they can't be learning anything, you know, let's try a different book. Actually, no, don't try a different book. If they want it, you know, read it to them, because it will be just deeper embedding the learning that they're getting from it and the experience that they're getting from it. In terms of communication with your parents, give parents your details of the books you'll be reading so they can buy it or they can borrow it from the library. You know, many times as a parent, when my children were in nursery, I don't know, Handa's Surprise, for example. I didn't know Handa's Surprise was a book. I hadn't heard of that particular book. And it was only when they got to the end of the topic, I went, here's all the pictures that we did about Handa's Surprise. I was like, well, if you'd have told me that a couple of weeks ago, I could have been reading it at home. So, you know, send your parents, you know, all of the details of all of the books that you're going to be focusing on. Have a lending library if you can. Ask children to bring in and share their favourite books, create reading dens. And I think it's really key as well. A lot of you are probably doing this, but I think it is sometimes overlooked. Include some non-fiction books in your repertoire. Non-fiction is really important as well for little people. So, and they very often enjoy that side of things too. Visuals. This is a biggie. So I'm only going to sort of touch on it because it's such a big topic. Okay. So what is a visual? Can be anything really that supplements your spoken language visually. So gestures, signs, pictures, objects, symbols, actions, written words, all of those are visuals. And why do we use visuals? As soon as I say a word, it's gone, it's disappeared. That's it. And if you haven't got that word and held on to it, and you don't have the skill to keep that word in your head for as long as you need it, gone. And it's also going to be replaced by lots of other words that you might not hinge on too. Visual supports last for much longer. So when we do use visuals, we're giving children extra time to understand, prepare for change, think about how to respond. They also help children to communicate. So for example, if you hold up 2 pictures, a child can point at the snack they want. So it's an easy way of getting very, very, very early non-verbal communication. So imagine you're putting together a tricky bit of furniture. We look at the symbols. We look at the instructions. We do it, any Lego builders like me, you need your visuals, okay? You might read the instructions, you might watch a video online. These are all visual support, and we do it as adults. So we need to be doing it with the children as well. We find it helpful, so will they. Even if their language is typically developing, visuals help everybody. And particularly if they are having challenges learning to talk and understand. So there's a massive myth that visuals will prevent a child from developing spoken language. No, it will not. Very often springboards children into using spoken language if you use spoken language alongside it. So Gans in 2007, using visuals can help children function more independently, decrease their need for adult prompts. The other study below, visual supports increase a child's speech production when spoken language is consistently paired with the symbol or the sign or the picture or whatever you are using. Reduces frustration, it makes communication easier. Very many times I've suggested PECs to parents, so picture exchange communication system, to our non-speaking children, and they've gone, but that will stop them talking. Or again with Makaton, but that will stop them talking. No, if I speak at the same time as I am signing or receiving that picture or that symbol, very often they soon go, oh, I don't need this symbol or this sign anymore, I've got the word. Okay, so if there is any trepidation from a parent or a professional about using any kind of visual because it will stop a child talking, it absolutely won't stop a child talking. This is the last slide, and it's just a really nice activity that I really like. So language communication and audit. So actually looking at you guys as a setting, and this is a lovely activity for your older children. So I'm talking possibly slightly bigger settings and your preschoolers. Give one child a week access to a camera for the morning, ask them to take photos of their 5 favourite things in the setting, print them out, make a collage, send it home to discuss with parents, again for that repetition, language consolidation. You can discuss it as group time, and you can also use it as feedback from your service users, the children in your setting. It's a lovely activity, and actually it will give you an opportunity to see through their eyes what they really like about your setting, which I think, again, sometimes we kind of overlook that, and it may surprise you what they come up with. So that is your whistle stop tour for making your setting a more communication rich setting. So I would like to invite any questions, and if I can give you any advice. And this is that awkward bit, which we have every single time, where I wait for people to either turn on